Dr. Emmanuel Bombandi there, the Executive Director of WANEB, talking about the Rwandan issue. Let me also go on the phone lines and speak to Irbad Ibrahim. He's an international news analyst and a security analyst too. Irbad, thanks so much. But 20 years ago, why did the world ignore Rwanda?
First of all, Bright, I think I agree perfectly with most of the things the doctor mentioned. As Africans, it really takes a toll on us to reminisce over such a tragic incident. The scars of war are really difficult to obliterate. But I'm quite optimistic about Rwanda because the current president is doing his best to rebuild the country with the same meticulous manner in which he wrested control of the state and ended the genocide.
Right.
The country has sought to incorporate its shattered people into what it insists can be a post-ethnic nation. It is trying to suppress ethnicity as it seeks to insulate future generations from trauma and ethnic mistrust. But looking back at what happened in '94, you can't help but blame the international community for sitting aloof.
Give me 30 seconds to cut in. You said you're very optimistic about Rwanda. The information is that the tension that existed before the genocide has not totally gone out, and that not that kind of peace one can talk of as far as what Kagame is doing is concerned. It's not all that good.
Yeah, exactly. But to wallow in pessimism really begs the question. I think the wise thing to do for us as a continent now is to stash away our painful past, rectify our present mistakes, and chart a course that will bring lasting peace and stability, not only to Rwanda, but for the rest of the continent. And therefore, I think my optimism is well placed because now there's relative peace in the country, and our hope and expectation is that that will be further engendered so that there will be reconciliation amongst the people for a lasting peace in the country. But I was honing in on the bit that the international community did not really live up to expectation because the international community stood aloof as people got slaughtered with reckless abandon. You see, there were three different categories of players in the genocide. We had the first category who were world powers that stood on the fence. For example, the UN withdrew its forces in the thick of the moment.
Right.
Belgium also withdrew its forces when it had lost only 10 of its soldiers. And the United States of America, who had the power to tilt the balance of the conflict, was also aloof because only a year before it had a very bad experience of intervening in an African conflict when its soldiers were killed and their bodies were dragged through the streets of Mogadishu. That was during the incident of Black Hawk Down. So the Hutus and Tutsis were left to eat each other in the streets of Kigali. And the Hutus make up the majority of the population. The Tutsis are a minority. But for us, the internal wrangling and blame game between France and Rwanda doesn't really matter, even though the Rwandans are accusing France of having a tacit approval and in some cases being complicit in the crimes that were committed. France has insisted that it only entered the conflict to create a buffer between the two feuding factions. But Bright, moving forward, I think the time has come for Africa to learn that politics, even though can be a very great tool for continental development, unwarranted political rivalry can have untold consequences on the continent. And then secondly, freedom of expression and healthy political debate enhance democracy. But sensitive issues that border on ethnicity, language, region of origin, etc., should be treated with utmost caution.
And so, Ibrahim, for instance, you will be worried if, for instance, the Ghana national ID card has the ethnicity of the holder on it.
Yes, certainly. I would be worried because when the street urchins, the Hutus, went on the rampage in '94, One easy way they used to segregate the Tutsis from the rest of the population and massacre them was that their identity cards gave them away. As Ghanaians, we are Ghanaians regardless of which part of the country we come from. Our identity should be Ghanaians rather than maybe belonging to different ethnic groups, whether Northerners, Southerners, or Fantis, or Akan people, or Evers, and all that. So it has come for the time has come for Africa to judge people not by their places of origin or tribe, but they should be judged by the substance or content of their character. And therefore, I think there's myriad lessons to learn from what happened some 20 years ago. But I'm a bit disappointed with the lackluster attitude of the international community in the case of the Central African Republic.
I'll come to that. Ibrahim, I'll let us come to that. But I want to ask you this. Before we come to if the world is ignoring another genocide in CR. Now, we heard of the famous phrase, cockroaches kill them. Let's look at the media's role and also the fact that there were already simmering tension before the media played that part to ignite the genocide. Would you blame the media?
Yes, sometimes there is a temptation to blame the media for causing what happened in Rwanda in '94. That is quite true because radio stations were instrumental in mobilizing the Hutus that went on the killing spree. But Bright, a careful perusal of the history and political dynamics of Rwanda points to a clear case of ethnocentric superiority. You see, the Tutsi minority have been the elitist ruling class for so long, until in 1959 when the Hutus stood up against the monarchy and toppled it. And in 1990, the Tutsis had been pushed into Uganda, and Paul Kagame, who was the head of the RPF, just as you have stated, invaded the country in 1990. So perhaps the media could have been used as a tool, but there were simmering issues that were bubbling under the surface. One ethnic group that has a chunk of the population felt like it was being ruled by a minority group. That is why I think perfect parallels can be drawn between the conflict in Rwanda and what is happening currently in the Central African Republic. So the media was instrumental, but you can't be presumptuous enough to accuse the media as the only cause of the conflict in the country.
Is the world ignoring another Rwanda in the making, the Central African Republic? Ibrahim, tell me.
Bright, having 1/3 of a population under the threat of extinction cannot be defined in any better way than a potential genocide in the offing. Because 1.6 million people are now under threat of hunger and starvation in the Central African Republic. But sometimes you can't blame the international community too much. Certain simmering events across the world might have taken the steam out of the efforts of the international community in the CAR. You've heard of the mystery of the missing Malaysian flight, Boeing 777, and that was the MH307, as well as the feuds and diplomatic row between Russia and the U.S. over Crimea. So I think these two important geopolitical events took the attention of the international community from the CAR. So for a moment, you would think that it was a forgotten conflict. But Ban Ki-moon passed through the CAR before attending today's anniversary, just to remind the international community that the events there are dear to the hearts of the UN, and they are not leaving any stone unturned in seeking a lasting solution to the conflict. France has already thrown in some 2,000 troops in there. The AU has got up to 6,000 people there. But still, we've not been able to stem the tide of violence in the CAR. That is why I think that we should treat the CAR's conflict as a peculiar situation. In the case of Rwanda, we had on our hands a pure case of an ethnic conflict. This is a religious one. Majority Christian anti-Balaka militias are killing minority Muslim selectors. And therefore, not only until we admit that there is a problem and we seek a holistic solution to it, there will continue to be killings in the streets of Bongi. And I'm also amazed at the little amount of participation the religious bodies in the CAR have been given in seeking a lasting solution to the conflict. This is a purely religious cleansing. People are being killed not because of their ethnicity or because of their language. They are one and the same people, but they are being killed because of their religion. And therefore, I would expect that at least the least the the international community can do is to have a joint statement by renowned African, clerics like Desmond Tutu of South Africa to speak against it and come out with biblical narratives that are against people killing people just because they don't share the same faith with you. Then from there, we can ratchet up the number of peacekeepers in the country. Ban Ki-moon is calling for some 12,000 more troops in there so that they can, occupy the expanse of the country. It is one of the largest geographical countries on the continent, even though it is sparsely populated. And therefore, it's a challenge for the UN, and I think there should be a recalibration of our commitment to the conflict so that we can stop this genocide in the offing.
Irbad Ibrahim, thanks so much for speaking to me, an international news and security analyst there, Irbad Ibrahim there, talking to me about if the world is ignoring another genocide in the Central African Republic. And a lot more of you have been sharing your comments on what you think about what happened 20 years ago, and if the world is ignoring the CAR as some cleansing, as it used to be, some are calling. Now, Sami from Techiman says the Rwanda genocide was planned. The West and their tricks, only God knows what they did. Well, let's leave it to God then. And then Abi from Madoko says 800,000 people killed and the world stood and watched. What can we say when our maker questions us? Well, those who are involved will have to answer that question when their maker asks them. But Nana from Shodru says, it's a sad day for the world, but we take consolation in the fact that the world has become a better place after. So he thinks that after Rwanda, the world is now a better place. And then Joe from Nandom says, condolences to those who lost families. God will replace their loss. And finally, Billy from Akosomo says, Rwanda will remain a better nation and God will bless them. And Asari Kumase says, please, the NPP should listen to the voice of God and allow the Congress to go on. We need our leaders well. We'll talk about the NPP later as Richard Nyama. We'll try hard to reach him. He promised to be in the studio. He's not yet here, but of course, we'll try hard to get him to respond. He says that he's seeking an injunction on the Congress if speeches will not be allowed. But when Kamla Kluche comes here, there is a curfew on Nakanduri, that part of the country, township and its environs, in the Mampusi East District. The Interior Ministry has imposed a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. curfew there. Kamla will ask questions from the police, why that curfew, and if it is indeed what will keep the peace. You're watching News at 10, and we are coming back in a moment.